The principle that we're going to look at today, the spiritual principle, is this idea. Ernest Holmes used it to open his radio show every single week 80 years ago. He would say, there is a power of good in the universe, and you can use it. There's a power of good in the universe, and you can use it. That's a spiritual principle that we're going to unpack a little bit today. I want us to look at how does this work in our personal lives, and how does this work in our work in the world. So, Michael and I are at a very interesting stage of life. We have 4 children ranging in age from 10 to 20. Ahmad, are you 26? Good Lord. And so that means we have one in elementary school, we have one in high school, we have one in college in California, and we have a young adulting. And so we have a full range of emotional needs happening in our home, in addition to our own, happening in our home all the time. All the time. We have a business that we run. We have dogs that we love. We have elderly parents that it is our honor and our privilege to give just a tiny bit of care for them in return for the care that they have given us over these decades. You know, there's a lot on us and a lot on our hearts. And I'm going to be 100% honest. It's hard not to worry sometimes. It's hard not to worry about things in the world. It's hard not to worry about pandemic recovery. Like, I think that there is something about this human condition that invites worry, and I don't like it. I don't like how I feel when I'm in it. So we're going to unpack worry a little bit today. Now, and I have his permission to share this with you, so know that. When I first met him, my husband's main coping mechanism in life was worry. Worry, worry, worry. He would just chew on stuff, and he would try to figure it out. And he's so smart, and he's so creative, and he's so brilliant that he just thought if he could just chew on it long enough, he'd figure it out. And then he'd be able to fix the problem and move on. But worry became his constant companion. It became his habit of thinking. He would just chew on it, chew on it, chew on it, and hope to find a way through. I, on the other hand, my superpower is running away. I have a superhuman ability when things get hard to withdraw and to ignore and to diminish. You see, what Michael did is he made problems bigger than they really were by worrying about them. What I did is I pretended that they weren't there, and I thought if enough time goes by, then maybe they'll take care of themselves. They didn't, did they? But also what that does, what I learned over time, over years of therapy and my spiritual practice and just learning how life works, what I realized over the years is that that was actually a trauma response from my childhood. It was safe for me to retreat to my books and my pets and my imagination. And that was actually a pretty good coping mechanism for a 7-year-old powerless little girl, right? I got through just fine and quite happily with my books and my imaginary friends, right? That doesn't work so well when you're a mom of 4 and problems arise and you want to either fix it in very unhealthy ways or you just want to run away and hide. Not so healthy when you're 51. So you can imagine when we met 20 some odd years ago, we were not super well equipped for this world that we live in. We weren't. Michael's way of confronting a problem was to overthink, to worry at it, to make it much, 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 much bigger than it actually was. And mine was to pull back, shrink away, ignore the problem, and hope it goes away. What we didn't understand then is that we were missing not only some healthy coping mechanisms, some healthy adulting strategies, but we were missing the main ingredient to a healthy life, an emotionally healthy life. We were missing a true partnership with a greater power. In 1943, Ernest Holmes wrote, "To start the day with a firm resolve not to worry is to practice the teaching of truth. This is a friendly universe, and God interpenetrates it as a loving presence and an all-intelligent mind. So we fret not and go ahead." Fret not and go ahead. I love this, but there are a couple of nuances here that I want to address. Not worrying does not mean to do what I did and just look away and hope that everything turns out okay. Not worrying doesn't mean throwing platitudes and affirmations at it, but not doing anything different to get a different result. It doesn't mean looking at the problem and saying, it's all good because God is in it. Okay, here's the thing. It is all good because God is in it, but we have to do something different. We have to do something different because when we just hope that God will show up, that, my friends, is bypass. It's spiritual bypass, it's magical thinking, and it's irresponsible. It's not about ignoring what's happening. It's about using the power within us. It's about using that brilliant mind in a healthy way to take actions for the good. It's about waking up and saying to ourselves, there's a power in the universe for good, and I can use it. I can use it to help create a better world for myself and for everyone. And then you ask, hey, God, what kind of good trouble can we get into today? Just like the great John Lewis taught us, let's trouble the waters of complacency in our own lives and in the world. Let's get ourselves out of our habits of thinking and think about doing something about what keeps us stuck in the consciousness of yesterday. Let's do something. Let's get into some good trouble. Let's trouble those waters of complacency. Fret not and go ahead means that we take the time to set ourselves straight. We take the time to remove our attention from worry and we place it on possibility. We watched the Democrats do that this week at their national convention. We watched what happens when we move from fear and worry and into hope and possibility. And if you watched any of that, you couldn't not notice the difference in what it felt like to move from fear and worry into hope and possibility. So how do we do that in our own lives? How do we do that? How do I stop worrying about my beautiful girl who's 1,000 miles away, living her own life and learning her own lessons? How do I not worry about that? How do I not worry when I'm watching my children do the human thing of that struggle of becoming an adult? It is a struggle for many of us, and it's okay. But how do I not worry about it? How do I not worry about my sweet boy with muscular dystrophy? How do I not worry about his future? How do I not worry about 5th grade? How do I extend my love without adding the energy of worry underneath it? I have never been part of a 12-step program, but I find so much wisdom in the big book of AA. Step one, this fascinates me. They say that the way to gain power over an addiction is to admit that you are powerless over the addiction. Sounds paradoxical, doesn't it? How can that be? How can the way to gain power over something be to admit that you are powerless over it? I was thinking about this a lot this week because there's a lot in the world that I am personally powerless over and that I care a whole lot about. There's a lot. And it's a helpless kind of feeling until the moment that I acknowledge that me, just me, I am powerless over a lot of it. But then, on the heels of that, we remind ourselves of where power really lies. My little ego self, the part of me that just wants to be safe and maybe do a little bit of good in the world, that little me has very little power in the world. Thank God for God, my friends. Thank God that there is an infinite wisdom, a power in the universe, that there is this one beneficial presence that is infinite. Infinite. So it can never be divided. Isn't that amazing? Thank God for God. Because when I remember God, when I partner with infinite possibility, I am no longer powerless. But first, I have to set aside the part of me that feels helpless. I have to acknowledge and set aside the part of me that worries. And then I can turn my attention to the infinite. The infinite, and I partner with infinite possibility. When I praise God, I am raising my own vibration of consciousness to the place of infinite possibility. And in that place where love reigns and anything is possible, I am no longer powerless. You see, I am no longer in want or in need or in worry. But I have to identify myself differently. I have to remove my attention from the small me and give my full attention to the true me. Because when I do that, I become curious. What good would God have for me in this? You see, when I'm curious, I can start to ask the better question. What great good would God have for this situation? And importantly, how can I be a vessel for that good? I don't know if y'all saw Stevie Wonder this week at the convention or if you heard his beautiful little speech ahead of time. But he said something that has been ringing in my heart. He said, we stand between yesterday's pain and tomorrow's promise. We stand in a liminal space between our experience of yesterday, which for some of us has been very painful and good too, and glorious too. But this human experience can be painful. And in every single moment, we have an opportunity to stand in the liminal space between that past experience and the infinite possibility that is ahead of us. And this place, this liminal space, is where we get to ask ourselves, who do I choose to be? What am I going to do with this precious life? I can worry, I can run away, I can feel hopeless and powerless, or I can lift my eyes for a greater truth. It reminds me, one of my favorite Bible verses in the book of Psalms, David says, I lift mine eyes to the hills, from whence cometh my help? And in that very act of looking up and acknowledging there's help out there somewhere, where is it coming from? Metaphorically, metaphysically, when we talk about lifting our eyes to the hills, what we're talking about is raising our consciousness from the level of the problem and raising our consciousness to the truth that is underneath the problem, the greater good that wants to be born through the problem. And when we look to the hills, when we raise our consciousness, we have an opportunity to become a part of the solution. I want to be a solution finder. Don't you? Don't you? Yeah. You, yeah, I have time. You have probably all heard this story, but it is so relevant and it's so true about the guy who was in the flood and he prayed for help to come find him, right? So God sent a truck. Hey, we're evacuating. Come get in the truck. Oh no, my God is going to save me because I prayed. You sure? Yeah, I'm sure. They go away. The waters rise. He goes up to the second story of his house and they send the boat. Hey, time to go. The waters are rising. It's all right. I prayed. God is going to save me. The waters rise. He goes to the roof. They send a helicopter. Bless them. I don't know why they kept going after him, to tell you the truth. They said, this is your time. This is it. The waters are still rising. We need you to come with us now. And he said, look, I have faith. I prayed, and God is going to save me. And they're like, okay, good luck swimming out of here. Eventually, he gets to the pearly gates. And God says, he says to God, he says, why didn't you save me? And God says, I sent a truck, I sent a boat, I sent a helicopter. We have to notice that there is something different headed our way, and we have to get on board with it, you see. The love of God can only do for us what God can do through us. And this is what that means. It means that we have to get curious and we have to be willing to do something differently. We have to be willing to do something different, to have a different experience of life. We do pray. I have a lot of faith, and I do pray. But then I open my eyes and I look for the trucks and the boats and the helicopters, right? And then you do something differently. I have never been on a helicopter. I would go on that one. But we have to be willing to do something different to have a different experience of life. Get curious about where help, where change is coming from, and get willing. That's the invitation today, is to get curious and get willing. Ernest Holmes said, there's a power of good in the universe, and I can use it. There's a power of good in the universe. That means being willing to have a different experience of life. A lot of pain happens because our little selves that are out of control, that are out of power, resist the change that love would have for us. And that's okay. But now we are in a liminal space between that past pain and that future possibility. We're in that liminal space, between spaces. Did you know, speaking of space, that an atom is 99.999% space and 0.00001% energy? Everything that you see, everything that you touch, everything that you are is energy and space. And for thousands of years, brilliant minds have posited that it is that very space that pulls the energy of the atoms together to make a matter, to make a table, that it's the space itself that is God. Many people don't call it God. Many of you don't call it God. I call it God because I don't have a better name for it, and I'm comfortable with that word. I also call it love. I call it divine intelligence because, back in Albert Einstein's day, they split one of those atoms, and half of it went in one direction, and half of it went in another direction. They passed one of those through a magnetic wall, and that atom changed direction. Guess what happened with its sister atom over here? It also changed direction. And Albert Einstein said, this shows us that there is intelligence in it. This is what God is. God is not an abusive old dude in the sky judging us. That is not what God is. God is the energy that pulls everything together for good. For good. And it isn't just the ancients who have taught this. The Max Planck, one of the greatest minds of the 20th century and considered the father of quantum theory, this is what he said when he was awarded the Nobel Prize for Physics. Nobel Prize for Physics. He said this: as a man who has devoted his whole life to the most clear-headed science, to the study of matter, I can tell you as a result of my research about atoms this much. There is no matter as such. All matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force which brings the particle of an atom to vibration and holds this most minute solar system of the atom together. We must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. We must assume that space is a conscious and intelligent mind. But I want you to do some logic here with me. If atoms are 99.999% this intelligent mind, what are you made up of? Atoms. You are made up of atoms. This excites me so much. This means that you are 99.999% the intelligent stuff of divinity. I just spit that at you in the front row. I'm so sorry. I'm so excited. This is so exciting. This changes everything. I know this isn't news. I know we've talked about this before. But it's so important. It's so important. I call this mind God, right? You can call it divine intelligence. You can call it spirit. You can call it the intelligence of love itself. But it's you. 99% God, 1% ego. 99% love, 1% doubt. 99% perfection and 1% beautifully humanly flawed. 99%. I can get on board with 99% good. I can do that. And when we truly begin to understand the magnificence of the truth of who we are, y'all, everything changes. We really can fret not and go ahead with joyful expectation because, and this is key, we understand that we are not alone. We don't have to figure it out. God already knows. We don't have to worry because Spirit within us already knows. It is divine intelligence itself, and this is what makes us up. And so when I say to wake up in the morning and get right with God, I'm saying to get up in the morning and center yourself in the truth of who you are. There is no sin. There is no God and. There is no separation. All of that, all of it is a mirage that our egos create to stay safe. Safety is awesome. I'm a big fan. especially when it comes to my children. But that 1% of us is a divine gift to help us stay safe, and that is not all that we are here to be. The divine intelligence within us wants to pull us out of our comfort zone so that we can experience greater and greater and greater love. That's all any of this is about. There is only so much love I can learn about in a vacuum. I need you to teach me about it. There is only so much love that I can experience without you. And the same is true of you. We need each other to meet in this liminal space where we allow ourselves to let the past be the past. Yes, it informs this moment, but it is not this moment. Let the power of possibility be. There is infinite potential over here, and we're headed in that direction, whether we like it and it feels safe or not. Things are changing. What if we meet each other in between, in that space that Stevie Wonder taught us about, in that liminal space? What if we were able to meet each other there in the fullness of who we are? The 99% and the 1%, fully present. Can you imagine what we could do together, who we could be together, what the world would look like if we all lived together from that place? Can you just imagine what the world would look like if we began, when we begin, to identify with our true nature, the 99%, and to live from that place, to shop from that place, to vote from that place, to have parent-teacher conferences from that place, to argue with our partners from that place, to cook beautiful meals that support our bodies from that place, to serve people who don't yet understand that that's the truth of them, and to know that about them anyway, and to love them. Can you imagine what the world will look like when we do that? I think it's going to be glorious. I think it's going to be glorious. I just want to, before I close, I just want to say, I can feel some of you saying, Shelley, it's nice to say don't worry, but you should see my life right now. How do I not worry? How do I not worry? And I just want to say this about that. The difference is in understanding the difference between God's work and your work. Okay? God's work, the 99%, that happens automatically. The 99% is automatic. Just like your heart is beaten automatically for you by your system, the 99%, that is God's work, happens automatically. Okay? So God's work, create, guide, do. My work, listen, be inspired, act with courage. God's work, be love. My work, do loving things. God's work, be truth. My work, do truth-telling. God's work, guide. My work, follow. We get in trouble and we get into worry when we mix up the jobs. Let God be God in your life, my friends. Let God be love in your life. Let God be truth in your life. All you have to do is show up for yourself and let God be God in you. So when life gets lifey this week, remember that you are made up of God's stuff. 99.9999% perfection. What are you going to do with all that perfection? What will you make of the God of love within you?